Hello everybody, Shemai, and welcome to this A-level English Literature live session, revision session for e-sgol. This evening you're going to have myself, Miss Hacker. I'll be taking you through Unit 3, or the Unit 3 exam, the Pre-1900 and Unseen Poetry, and then Miss Davis will be taking you through the Unit 4 Shakespeare exam straight afterwards. Okay, so let's have a little think then about the exam itself, the Unit 3 exam paper breakdown. So as we know, it's a 2-hour exam. It's an open book exam, so we'll take in clean copies of our poetry collection. And the exam itself is separated into 2 sections. Section A, which is 60 marks in total, is the section that is going to be on the collection of poetry, pre-1900 poetry that you have studied. And there are 2 questions there. You've got your named poem question worth 15 marks, and then the essay question worth 45 marks. Then section B, also worth 60 marks, is the unseen poetry comparison question. So what we'll do this evening is I will take you through some hints and tips for how best to answer all 3 of those questions on the Unit 3 exam. Okay, so let's start with question 1, the named poem or extract. It's out of 15 marks and you are only assessed through AO1 and AO2, and the weightings are as follows. AO1 is worth 5 marks and AO2 is 10 marks. So let's have a little look at those in a bit more detail. The assessment objectives then, what exactly do they mean? So assessment 1, our bread and butter AO, is your ability to articulate informed, personal and creative responses to the literary texts using associated concepts and terminology and coherent, accurate written expression. So that's worth 5 marks for this particular question. And let's have a think then about breaking that assessment objective down. I've got the band 5 assessment descriptors here, just for us to have a look at how the AO can be separated up for you to really see where those marks are coming from. So in a band 5 response, there would be a sophisticated, creative and individual response to the poem or extract. Your ideas would be thoughtful and your response is fully engaged and relevant. There would be confident, perceptive application of literary concepts and terminology. Your ideas would be effectively organised and demonstrating flair, and you would show high levels of technical accuracy and adopt a clear academic style and register. Okay, so essentially we can separate that into 3 sections. You are fully engaged with the question. You've got that application, those apt applications of literary terminology. Your ideas are organised and you adopt that clear academic style of writing throughout. Those are very important to be able to gain those marks in that AO. Assessment objective 2 then, out of 10 marks, is your ability to analyse ways in which meanings are shaped in literary texts. So this is the exploration of the language, form and structure of the particular poem or extract. And our band 5 descriptors then, perceptive, sophisticated analysis and evaluation of the writer's use of language and poetic techniques to create meaning, confident and apt textual support, and confident discussion of implicit meaning. Now, no other assessment objectives are assessed in question 1. So please make sure that you do not spend a lot of time including contextual information that you have revised about your specific poet, because it's not going to gain you those extra marks. AO2 is your ability to analyse in a sophisticated manner the writer's use of language, form, structure and poetic technique. And then it's that confident and apt textual support. That's what we're focusing on in AO2. So how should you tackle this first question then? And what I've got here is a step-by-step approach that is covered in more detail in the recordings that are already on the e-sgol Teams file on the Unit 3 exam. So steps 1 to 6 then. Firstly, we read the question and highlight the keywords and commands. What exactly is being asked of you? Then we reread the named poem or extract that we've been directed to without making notes. So this is our refresher read, our a chance to read back through the poem and just remind ourselves what it's about. Once we've done that, we would then get an overview of the poem in the light of the task. So start getting some ideas in your mind, generating an overview of the poem in light of what the task is asking you. Step 4 then is to reread the poem, now making your notes. Okay, so we're making notes on tone, keywords, imagery, allusion, technique, and so on. Again, really based on the task. Now, this planning stage, as I said in one of the recordings already, can be completed in your pink answer booklet. And then once you've completed your plan and you've finished using it, you would put a cross through it. Or you can complete the plan in the question booklet itself, because remember, the question booklet isn't going anywhere at the end of the exam. It will be collected in by the exams officer and kept and then eventually sent back up to the English department. So the examiner will never see that question booklet. So you're free to write on it or annotate it as much as you want. Step 5 then is to review those notes in light of the keywords from the question. So again, we're constantly reminding ourselves, what angle is it that the question wants us to look at that particular poem or extract? It's not going to be a question asking you to go through the poem or extract line by line. It's going to be asking you to look at a specific theme or idea or presentation of something in that particular poem. So you must be specific. And then step 6 then is to write your response. Again, focusing on the task, the poem, and AO2, the digging for meaning. And if we constantly use that step-by-step approach, particularly when you're revising, when it comes to the exam itself, you'll feel more confident about what you should do and how you should go about answering that particular question. Remember, the way the questions are asked is always the same kind of way. So if you look back at past questions, you can begin to see the patterns for how the questions are worded, and you can use that then as a springboard to begin to create your own questions ready for revision. So just some do's and don'ts then to finish on this particular question. Do start your response directly and relevantly. So don't go about the houses doing a cranking up paragraph, as I like to say. You need to go straight into focusing on what the question is asking and starting directly. Okay, there's no need for sort of long-winded introductions. We go straight into that analysis. Do look for patterns of language and imagery in the poem. Do make and support points succinctly. Okay, so no waffle. You don't have time for that in this particular question. Make your point succinctly and make sure that you get to the point straight away. Do use tentative language. This could imply, or perhaps the writer is stating, or another way of reading this could be that tentative language is academic in its style and register, and it immediately signposts to the examiner that you are aware that something can be read in more than one way and that implicit meaning is present. Do use technical terminology to demonstrate the extent of your understanding. Make use of the terminology to show off, but don't just plonk a poetic term in there without doing anything with it. You must use that to demonstrate how the writer has created meaning. Do take care with your expression, remember to paragraph, and remember to proofread your response once you've finished. And I'll be reminding you about that throughout this, because the importance of proofreading at the end of your response is paramount. Don't start at the first line of the poem or extract and work through line by line. That is not what this question is asking you to do. It wants you to be specific, to look at a specific theme or idea in the poem. You're not going to do yourself any favours with marks or time if you try to go through every line of the poem. Don't write descriptively or narratively about the poem. Being succinct is key. So don't retell the story of what's going on and so on and so forth. You don't have time for it, and it's not particularly academic. Don't write lengthy and clunky introductions, okay? We want to go straight into it, nice and succinct. So a good example is, this is a poem written in the 17th century by John Donne in memory of his deceased wife, Anne. Full stop. A nice, concise, straight to the point overview of a particular poem. Don't make extended or extensive references to context. Remember, for this particular question, it is AO1 and AO2 only. You are not given any marks for contextual knowledge and understanding. That comes in the next question. So don't waste time doing it in this one. Don't use very long quotations or copy out large chunks of the text. Even if you feel that that's great because it's taking up space, it's not useful. You need to be really, really specific. You may choose a small phrase or even one word as your textual support, and that's absolutely fine. Don't use technical terms descriptively and for their own sake. So again, don't just plonk the terms in there. On to question 2 now then, the 45-mark essay. As I said, it's worth 45 marks, and you were assessed through AO1, AO2 and AO3 in this question. And their weightings are AO1 10 marks, AO2 5 marks, and AO3 30 marks. So the contextual understanding and the awareness of how context influences the way things are written is the really meaty marks in this question. So again, here's AO1. Same slide as previously. I won't sort of go through that again, but please familiarise yourself again with AO1. It's that individual creative response, the correct use of terminology, and adopting academic style and register throughout. That's 10 marks. Again, AO2, just 5 marks for this one. Again, that's your sophisticated analysis of the writer's use of language, form and structure, and also apt textual support. So refamiliarise yourself with that, with assessment objective 2, the same assessment objective as in the first question. Now on to AO3. So something that's not assessed in the first question, but is heavily assessed in this particular question. AO3 is your ability to demonstrate understanding of the significance and influence of the contexts in which literary texts are written and received. And the band 5 descriptor for this, you would demonstrate perceptive and productive discussion of the significance and influence of the context of the time and also when the poet or writer was writing. It's confident analysis of context in which texts are written and received, and confident analysis of the connections between texts and their contexts. So essentially, for this particular question, you really, really do need to make sure that you are revising properly the context in which not only the poems were set, where they were written, it's that historical, political, cultural and social context that surrounds the poetry collection. And that is something that you really do need to focus on in your revision, because it is really, really important that you demonstrate the depth of your knowledge and understanding of those contextual influences. And what you are expected to do then is to interweave that contextual knowledge throughout the body of your essay. And as I touch on in one of the previous recordings, we're not just plonking huge chunks of context at the start or at the end of our essay, because that's not particularly useful. We are interweaving it throughout our analysis. We are using our AO2 and AO1 to interweave our AO3. Now, something that's really important to note, there's no need to compare at all in this section. You're never going to be asked to compare poems or extracts by the same poet. That is only something that happens in the AS Unit 2 exam. So essentially what you are doing is you are writing 3 to 4 small essays bunched together on the particular poems with the interweaving context throughout. So no need to compare at all. Again then, let's have a little look at a step-by-step approach to this question. So just like question 1, we read the question and highlight the keywords and commands. You are going to be asked to look for a specific theme or idea that is presented by the poet or the writer. And you need to make sure that you fully understand what it is the question is asking you to look for. You need then to decide on 3 poems or 3 to 4 extracts from Chaucer and Milton, depending on what you've studied, which will help you to answer the question. So, you know, be sensible about this. 3 good-sized poems. If you pick 3 short ones, so for example, if you're studying John Donne and you choose 3 sonnets, you may have time and want to think about introducing a 4th there. But your 3 poems or 3 to 4 extracts is your stock amount required for this particular question. In your exam booklet then, make a note of the key points to make about the poems in light of the question. So let's begin to think about how they are connected to the question. Make sure you have an overview of the poet's work in light of the question, and then begin to look more closely at how meaning has been created. So when you're looking at these poems and you've chosen your poems, make sure at first you have an overview of what the poet's work demonstrates in light of the question, and then you start to look in a bit more depth for the meaning. Make a note of the context which would be relevant in light of the question. And again, just like question 1, I'm always saying in light of the question, or referring back to the question, because you have to be specific to this question. You cannot shoehorn in content that you have revised and that you want to get in that isn't being asked of you, because it won't gain you marks. It really has to be specific to the question. Then once you've done that, you write your response focusing on the task, the selected poems, and AO2. Again, then, some do's and don'ts for some essay practice. So for when we're revising, start your response directly and relevantly. So again, let's get succinct. Let's get in there with those overviews. Do look for patterns of language and imagery. Do make and support points succinctly. Do use tentative language. Do use technical terminology to demonstrate the extent of your understanding. And take care with your written expression. Don't start at the first line of the poem and work through line by line. So just like question 1, we mustn't be going line by line through every poem. You're not going to have time for that. Remember, this is a 120 mark paper, 2 hours, 1 hour on section A, 1 hour on section B. They're both equally weighted, so we don't have the time to be fussing around with going line by line. You need to be specific. You're looking for specific ideas and themes in each poem. Don't write descriptively or narratively about the poem. Again, being succinct is key. Don't write lengthy and clunky introductions. Don't make extended or extensive chunked references to context. Don't use long quotations, and don't use technical terms descriptively and for their own sake. So again, the same do's and don'ts as with the named poem question. The same things apply here. The only difference is obviously that we must be interweaving that, that context into our analysis. Now we're going to focus then on section B, the unseen poetry question. So again, 1 hour on section A, 1 hour on section B, and then obviously if you're eligible for extra time, then you adjust that accordingly. Now in this particular question, the skills being tested are AO1 for 15 marks, AO2 for 15 marks, and then AO4, your ability to make productive and illuminating connections between the poems, 30 marks. So there's double the amount of marks available for those illuminating connections, comparisons, and contrasts. Okay, so 1 hour required for answering this question. 15 to 20 minutes of this should be planning, and I cannot stress that enough. It might feel like that's a heck of a long time to be planning, but it is incredibly beneficial. Remember, these are unseen poems. You're very unlikely to be familiar with them, and so you will need the time to plan, to analyze, and to construct then your response effectively before you actually begin the process of writing it. So another step-by-step approach then for this particular question. Again, this can all be found in previous recordings. Step 1 is to read the question and highlight the keywords or commands. You will be asked to look at a specific thing. Step 2 then is to read through poem A twice. Okay, so you 100% have to use poem A. That is the mandatory poem. So we need to make sure that we are familiar with that particular poem. So the first time you look at it, just read it. The second time, start making some tentative notes and try to come to some general conclusions based on the set question. The set question will give you a hint, a very brief hint, but it will give you a hint as to the path that it wants you to take. Then step 3 is to read through the other 3 poems twice. You're going to need to choose another poem to go with poem A, but don't just choose the shortest or the briefest poem just because it's short. You need to read through all of those poems and see which one you think has the best connection with poem A, and that it may not be the briefest or shortest poem. Step 4, choose the poem which you wish to compare to poem A and begin to make notes based on the set question on both poems. So again, we're thinking about tone, keywords, imagery, language, allusion, poetic techniques, structure. We need to be thinking about all of those things. Step 5 then is to begin to make a list of connections. And what I mean by that is comparisons, but also contrasts, differences, which might be useful in your response. Step 6 then is review your notes in light of the keywords from the question. So again, keep reminding yourself what that question is asking. And then step 7 is then when you're finally ready to write your response, focusing on the task, the poem, and AO2. If you follow those steps and make sure that you plan effectively and efficiently, that will then help you to construct a thorough and well thought out response. So some top tips to end then. Avoid the line-by-line approach. Again, throughout this exam paper, we're always avoiding the line-by-line approach. We must be selective. Not everything in the poem is going to be relevant, just like not everything in the named collection is going to be relevant for the question. And begin to make connections and contrasts from the outset. Get yourself into that mindset that you need to be comparing and contrasting at all times. Now, if you want some more information on these questions, along with some exemplars, some ideas, some good examples of opening paragraphs and content, then please check out the other recorded sessions. There are 2 on the Teams folder, one for Unit 3, the essay and unseen poem, and one for Unit 3, the named poem analysis. Take your time then, just to end. It's especially important you take your time to read the poems. Read poem A twice. The first time, just read it. Second time, maybe even third time. Make some notes and try to come to some general conclusions based on the set question. The question itself gives you a way into the poem. Okay, so in the case of the example, it's the presentation of spring. This should now allow you to analyse poem A, which you must write about and give some focus to your thinking. Remember, you don't have to write about every word or every line or even every section of the poem. Focus on the key points that you want to make. If you don't understand a word or a line, does the rest of the poem help you to begin to understand the meaning? But if you still don't understand it, don't panic, just ignore it and move on. Focus on the parts that you do understand. Once you feel reasonably confident with poem A, read through the other poems at least twice. This will give you an opportunity to make good choice for your second poem. There's no right or wrong answer. There isn't one that's more akin to poem A than the others. It's all about the connections that you see. And then once you've made that choice, begin to annotate the poem, always trying to focus on the task and poem A. So just some top tips to close for this paper then. Take time to read all instructions and questions carefully in order to avoid making errors which will affect your overall mark. Remember, you are answering the question that is set, not the question that you wish had been asked or that you were hoping would come up. You must focus on the question that it is asking you. Always avoid a line-by-line approach to analysing the poems in any of the questions on this paper. The balance of text and context is crucial for success in section A part 2 in that essay. The context in the task itself in section A part 2 questions are meant to guide the response, so make sure you refer to it as you answer the question. And then for the unseen poetry then, you must write about poem A. Remember that half the marks for this question are for making connections and contrasts, and begin each essay with a clear reference to the task. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm now going to pass you on to Miss Davis, who will be taking you through Unit 4.
Hello and welcome to the second part, taken over from Miss Hacker for the Unit 4. So as Miss Hacker has stipulated in her video, her section, it's really important that you appreciate and you know your paper. So what we're looking at now is the Unit 4 Shakespeare paper. So this paper will be testing your knowledge and your understanding of your chosen Shakespeare play. And on that note, it's very important for me to make sure that you are aware of the fact that if you, for example, are quite familiar with another play, so for example, if you're familiar with The Tempest as well as Hamlet, you must ensure that you answer the extract and the essay on the same paper, on the same play, okay? So even if you're familiar with the other one, you must answer on the same play for both questions. So stick to one Shakespeare text, please. The paper is, so as you know, it's a closed book examination, which means that preparation is a must. You will need to ensure that you have revised fully and thoroughly. Also, just to make sure that you're aware, there's 2 sections. So you've got the extract, which is worth 45 marks, and you've also got the essay, which is worth 45 marks. Just a reminder, just to allow plenty of time for section B when you're thinking of your extract and planning and writing your extract. So this is the front cover of the examination paper. Make sure that you have read all of the instructions clearly. So again, like I've said to you, okay, so the same play must be chosen for both section A and section B. So again, on the in the instructions and the rubric here at the front, it does stipulate, okay, so if you answer on Hamlet and The Tempest, so 2 separate plays, that would class as a rubric infringement then, okay? Write your answers in separate answer book provided, so ideally black ink. And at the bottom here, you have got this reference to your reminder that assessment will take into account the quality of written communication used in your answer. So here's your AO1. Okay, so here we're talking about your academic register, but again, Ms. Hacker's already touched upon that. The skills that are being tested in this examination paper are your AO1, so this idea of a coherent and clearly structured argument, so something which is well organised and something which is sensible, and also that you're able to provide us with a focused, close analysis of the extract. So you need to maintain and ensure that you've got a detailed, thorough analysis of the given section or extract. You have got 45 minutes ideally for your extract question, and just that reminder that you're looking at AO1 and AO2. So if you've got some lovely context that links to this, fine, okay, but don't waste your time putting in your contextual information, your contextual detail, because there are no marks awarded for it in this section. So how do you get full marks? So what you've got here are the band 5 descriptors, okay? So what do you need to do in order to access those? So you've got this idea of a response which is sophisticated, that it's thoughtful and that it's engaged. You've also got words such as perceptive and confident being expressed here. All right, and AO2 very similar. You got that word perceptive being repeated, that sophisticated, confident discussion of the text. Something which is flawless, something which is easy, that you are confidently selecting textual support, okay? But note here, just a quick reminder, you've got 30 marks, haven't you, okay, for your AO2. So just making sure you're aware of the importance of that there, okay? Because it's obviously double weighted. So the time for answering, you've got 45 minutes approximately. The assessment objectives, like we've said, are AO1 and AO2, okay? So again, look at the difference, 15 marks, 30 marks, so just be mindful of that. Just a little reminder to reread the extract really carefully, noting down keywords, key phrases, any sort of motifs or imagery that you think may be relevant to the question. And this whole time you need to be thinking about how Shakespeare shapes meaning through his choices. Look for any patterning of imagery which may be used to reinforce meaning, maybe there to sort of make you consider its impact. And then you've got carefully consider the form and structure of the speeches in the extract. Is there use of prose, poetic form? So this idea of blank verse or iambic pentameter, quite possibly. And you just need to make sure that you link any such observations to the question focus. Okay, you need to make sure that you start your response with this brief overview of what's happening at this particular point in the play. So you basically put in the extract into some sort of context. So you need to just make sure that you're able to place it. Okay, to show your knowledge and understanding of the text, and then begin to organize your ideas in an effective manner. Okay. We need to make sure that when we are considering the AO2, when we're thinking of the pattern of imagery and form and structure, phrases and imagery that's being kind of noted, we also have to remember that we're thinking about this as a drama as well. So always refer to yourself as the audience. Think about, so for example, if the extract is one of Hamlet's soliloquies, say for example, be mindful that you're talking about what the dramatic impact of the soliloquy is in that context. You would possibly talk about the engagement that allows with the audience. Okay, so just be mindful of that. And that's what's covered here on this slide as well. Okay, so this idea, just to remember that this is a drama text and where relevant to the question, you need to try and show how any staging or setting, the use of dramatic devices such as sound, props, quite possibly, how they're designed to sort of get this response from you as an audience. Is there use of dramatic irony? Is there use of symbolism? All right, ensure that your response to the extract question shows that you fully engage with the extract, but also the question. Okay, so the key words that we're thinking about is analyze how a specific character is presented or Shakespeare's presentation of, and the question also asks you to look at language and imagery. So you really need to consider what the audience is seeing, what is the dramatic purpose of the characters in this given extract. So you've got identifying the keywords, phrases and imagery which may be relevant to how Shakespeare presents Lear at this point in the play. So the question focus is here, okay? How does Shakespeare present Lear at this particular point in the play? There's your question choice, question focus. So you can see there's a number of words that have been repeated here or highlighted here in red to show repetition. So you've got imagery choices, repeated link to sight, okay, when referencing the blind Gloucester. So you can see you've got use of see, you've got use of eyes, okay, you've got multiple repetition of specific words here, okay. So it's just very important that you're mindful of that. And then you've got this thematic link to status, power, justice as well. So just making sure that you're able to pick these particular aspects out. Also note how there's use of colour imagery. Like I said, this link to this idea of status as well. Okay, so anything that's repeated, anything that's evident. You could even look at the use of punctuation. So there is this repeated use of question marks here, okay? You've also got the use of the semicolon. Okay, so everything slows this down, okay, in the text. All right, so just being conscious of that as well. So little things that you could be picking up on that isn't particularly complex, isn't particularly difficult for you. So thinking about the approach to AO2 here, so type of way you could potentially approach this is Shakespeare uses black comedy to emphasise the pathos of Lear trying to engage with the blind Gloucester, as his vivid bluntness about his blindness, get the glass eyes, confirms his mad state. So you've got here again this use of the AO2, okay? So you've got the textual support being given here. The end of the extract, however, shows a new calmness and recognition of Gloucester, and he feels the need to impart his new insights to his friend. The blank verse and use of semicolons, like I said, picking up on that use of punctuation. In the last few lines, help to add to a sense of dignity and calmness to Lear, in contrast to the more colloquial discourse at the start of the extract. So looking at the way it goes from quite sort of like chatty and informal to a little bit more formal towards the end. So marking the changes, being able to track any relevant change is very important. And then you've got the use of the frequency of exclamation marks and question marks in Lear's speeches, help to create the impression of Lear as ranting and preaching about the world as he sees it, as he now sees it. So this idea that if you are going to be picking up on the use of punctuation, you've got to always make sure you're considering the impact that that has, okay? So this particular example answer here starts with a really clear question focus. So opens with Shakespeare presents Lear in a state of mental confusion. So you're being asked in your question to look at how Shakespeare presents Lear, okay? And here you've got a clear argument. So starts with a clear focus on the set question, work this way through a little bit where you've got this use of imagery of sight. It runs throughout the extract, reinforces Shakespeare's presentation of Lear as one of beginning to understand and see the error of his judgment as a father and as a king, and also sees through appearances of virtue in those with wealth and authority. So make sure that you are gaining credit by making close reference and analysis, okay? So right from the outset, this particular response is getting that credit, getting that reward there as well, okay? You've also got towards the end here the use of the short price specific textual support. So towards the bottom here, you've got that in the second paragraph towards the end, you've got use of rascal beadle, hotly lust, it's in italics here, whips, robes, furred gowns, rags and tattered clothes. So you've got these very short, very specific, but what you're looking at is appropriate textual support, confident textual support, okay? Being able to pick out the right quotations most definitely shows an examiner that you like, it demonstrates your understanding, okay? So before we move on then to the essay, just that reminder that you've got 45 minutes. Obviously, you know, you may have extra time, okay? But in the standard timing that you have, it's 45 minutes. So we're thinking about 10 minutes for your planning, your preparation, your reading of the extract, your engagement with the extract, and then the rest of the time then allocated to the writing, okay? And then you've got your section B, so your essay. So you're being advised to answer one question only. That's stipulated here because you do have a choice of two, okay? You've got an either or in this particular question, okay? So in your response, you're required to analyse how meanings are shaped. So there you've got your AO2. Demonstrate the understanding of significance and influence of the context. So there's your AO3, and then show how different interpretations have informed your reading. And then obviously we can't forget at the bottom, you've got AO1, 15 marks, AO2, 15 marks, AO3, 15 marks, AO5, 15 marks. Okay, so you've got the 15, 15, 30, 15. So don't forget AO1, obviously, okay, the need to write accurately, structure your essay accordingly, but also make sure that you're noting the fact that your AO3 is double weighted here. So just to quickly go over what skills are being assessed, okay? So we've got this reminder here as well that this is a closed book examination. So there is that expectation that you have prepared fully, you've revised, you've learned your quotations, you know the relevant contextual detail that you're going to be able to apply, and that you understand the impact and significance of it, and that you also have engaged with and prepared yourself fully by showing an appreciation of relevant critical readings, whether they be named readings, named critical quotations, or sort of more generalized where you're talking about maybe a feminist interpretation, historicist critic, you know, you could potentially go about it a different way like that, okay? So you've got A1, being able to structure a nicely organised answer, analysing the use of dramatic techniques and relevant language choices. Okay, obviously we know the focus there is on that use of dramatic techniques and this idea of providing apt textual support. Also your ability to show clear understanding of the significance and influence of context. And then lastly, the fourth bullet point is your AO5. So where you're showing your ability to respond to a given view in the question. And you'll see that in a second when we look at the question choices. It forces you to consider a specific view, and it also forces you to consider it in light of the relevant context, okay? One thing that we need to be really careful with regards to our AO5 is this sense of using this tentative language, okay? So often what you find is candidates, they use some critical readings or name critical readings, but they often neglect the easiest aspect, which is to possibly use the tentative language choices. So things like perhaps, some, others, maybe, it could be argued that. So if you maintain that tentative argument throughout, you are ticking that box of a critical reading or critical stance or approach right from the outset, okay? Obviously, you know, you probably won't get much higher than, say, a band 2, but it's better than having 0. So always make sure, regardless of essay, be it your extract or your main essay, that you do kind of approach it with that kind of tentative language when it comes to choices. So again, looking at the band 5 descriptors for this particular answer and this question. So remember here, okay, that your examiner will be looking for a good essay which answers the question directly and fully, okay? But again, if we look at the keywords that are being used here, sophisticated, thoughtful, perceptive, productive, mature, confident, okay? So there's this need, in order to push yourself into that top band, to be confident in your analysis, to be able to commit to an idea, to write in an articulate way with a good, sound academic register, okay? So here's a sort of like step-by-step guide almost as to how to approach it. So approaching this particular question. So step 1, read both questions on your chosen play carefully, consider a possible approach to both. To each of them before choosing where you're going to go. So like I said, it's either or. You'd be given 2 options and then you've got to go, right, which one am I most confident with? Okay. So you then decide, right, I'm going with, say, number 1. Okay, so you need to plan your response by, to start with, identifying what the key strands of the question are and how they target the different assessment objectives tested in this section, and also to start thinking about making notes that allow you to select relevant material from the play, any relevant context that you were thinking, oh, I can apply that, any other viewpoints, okay? Make sure that if you are planning in your examination answer booklet, that you draw lines through it so we know as examiners that it's not being marked. Obviously, the question paper, that just stays in the centre, okay? So you can always just make your notes on that if you wish to on the back page or whatever, and then that just stays in the centre, so that doesn't get sent off with your examination paper. So ideally, you want to be spending around 10 to 15 minutes planning here, okay? You write your response in the hour that's remaining. You open your response with an opening paragraph that clearly engages with the question and also the text, and you try to give a brief kind of overview of the issues that need to be debated. And this last bullet point is what's really important here, okay? So this need to develop the response, now as you develop your response, you need to make sure that you integrate any contextual discussion. To integrate means to kind of weave it in, okay? What we don't want are standalone, sort of shoehorned in AO3 and AO5 points, okay? Material that doesn't really relate to the text and doesn't really relate to the question, all right? So like I said, you'd have 2 possible question choices. So you've got 2 different themes is what we've got here. Consider which characters, this is what you should be doing when you're planning. Consider which characters you discuss in light of these questions and what parts of the text are relevant, and also think about, right, what contextual material stands out to me. But if you look at these questions, okay, you can see from this slide where we were talking about the key strands, okay? So you're looking at religion and the supernatural here, okay? Here, you've got your AO3, all right? So you've got AO3 there. Here, when we're thinking about blame, you're thinking about AO5, and possibly you could look at AO2 here, okay, with regards to your argument. Again, this idea of avenger, you've got linked to AO3. And then again, this view, how far would you agree with this view of the play? So again, AO5, but allows you to bring in the AO2 as well, and the AO1, because obviously it's linking to you answering the question. The one that we're going to look at a little bit more depth is the second question. So again, women, as you can see, is highlighted in red. So again, you've got your AO3, so attitudes towards women. Quite possibly you could consider the view of women during the kind of Elizabethan and Jacobean era, the idea that they have no voice, again, they're being silenced is what we're thinking about, their dramatic importance, okay? So again, AO2, we could be thinking about here with regards to the play on stage. And then you've got this link to this idea of the treatment by men. Again, AO3 is possibly looking at the kind of patriarchal, misogynistic society, all right? So what you've got here is for the women question, okay? So women have no voice in this play. Their dramatic importance derives only from their treatment by men. And this has been taken straight from the mark scheme, okay? Material which might be useful for this question. So types of ideas is what we're thinking about, right? So if that was your question, what kind of points are you going to be making? So you could look at Gertrude and her relationships with her son and her husband. You could look at her first marriage as described by the ghost. You could look at the dramatic significance of her speeches, most specifically the closet scene that she has with Hamlet, that exchange. You could look at the presentation of Ophelia's relationships with her father, her brother, and her lover. The presentation of her madness may arguably be show that she finally finds a voice, the significance of her soliloquy on Hamlet's apparent madness. And then obviously we're thinking about then the context. So the context of historical attitudes towards women and their traditional roles. You could look at ideas about marriage, adultery, religious beliefs, the function and the purpose and the role of the royal court. You could consider ideas about kingship, the setting of the play in Denmark. Quite possibly you could think about the link that it has to like contemporary English historical social context. You could look at the tragic conventions linked to sort of the Spanish tragedy, Thomas Kyd. Okay, so lots of different elements that you kind of go down, roads you can go down, and obviously then critical views on how the two women kind of interact, and you can also consider their dramatic kind of contribution to the play as a tragedy as well. So here what you've got is just a possible sort of introduction. So you've got Shakespeare's Hamlet is set in a regal court. So your regal court allows you to kind of hit that AO3 straight away, run by men and to a male agenda. So straight away, you've got your AO1, your satisfying demands of the question, presents women as either toys or obstacles in an exclusively male power play. Again, totally aware of the question. Similarities can be drawn between the prominent female figures of Gertrude and Ophelia, so making it clear to the examiner that you know that there are only two female characters present in the play, and the fact that they are treated quite poorly by their male counterparts. And then you've got this use of the word ambiguity, okay? So making it clear that you understand how Shakespeare has presented them. So the ambiguity of both Gertrude and Ophelia's involvement in deviant sexual activities, adultery and premarital sex respectively, make it difficult to decipher their roles as women in Elizabethan society. Whereas now, a feminist slant would criticise a society that places women in categories. At the time of Shakespeare's contemporaries, this ambiguity reflects a lack of opportunity for women to express their true sense of self. So you've got this here then, your AO5, okay? A feminist slant would criticise, okay? So thinking about this idea of how they'd have been viewed in Elizabethan society, using that view and then flipping it and thinking about, right, how would it be considered today, okay? The only thing that's possibly missing here is AO2 textual support, but obviously ensuring that later in the essay you go on to maintain that idea. So you do need to try and leave a full hour for writing the essay. Obviously, think carefully about how you're going to approach the question. Make sure you've got sensible, organised notes for your plan. Make sure that you have got time to read over your work at the end before you write a kind of a brief conclusion. All right. And there's also that reminder that the examiner is looking to reward the quality of your points, not necessarily the quantity. And as examiners, we simply just want to see fully developed answers. All right. So that draws us to a close with regards to your live sessions, and we'd like to appreciate you and show our appreciation to you for giving us your time, and also take this opportunity to wish you all the best in your upcoming examination series. So diolch yn fawr, thank you very much.